Three.
Cloud. All right. We're live, we're rolling, everything's good. Well, it's good to be back. Let me make sure my phone is on Do Not Disturb. All right. Looks like some folks are still trickling in. Let's make sure we get them taken care of. Boom, boom. Look at this. They're flying in. Well, okay, yeah, so happy release day once again to us and us VIPs as well, because you now get to improve your funk rhythm guitar playing, which is not just about playing funk guitar. It is about everything. The techniques in this course translate to literally every style of contemporary music. A lot of what I put in that course comes directly from how I've learned. And I thought, this is going to be valuable for a ton of folks, regardless, like I said, of the style of music you play, because this 16th note rhythm in your strumming hand, I mean, once you get it happening, it never leaves. It doesn't matter. And particularly we could do a whole course, and I did a lot of it in my TrueFire, one of my TrueFire acoustic courses, where we hear people playing like those kind of rhythms, on acoustic guitar. The same principles in my strumming hand apply for that as we do with funk. It's just keeping that thing going. So it was really exciting to put that course out, but man, it put me in the weeds. I haven't put a YouTube video out in 3 weeks. It's probably going to be 4. I was going to do one tomorrow, but I got called for some other fun music work that I'm going to do instead. Because the course really was demanding. You'll see when you get into it, there's quite a lot of sections regarding some stylistic things and some different categories of stuff, and just putting it all together sometimes, it's my little one-man army in here, me shooting and editing and everything, can take some time. So and if anybody has already checked it out some, please jump into chat. The routine, most of you. We'd love to hear what you like about it, and any other questions. We always get rolling and start to address them. So Steve, allow me to, if you don't know the illustrious Steve is the one who is answering lots of your customer support and making this ship run as smoothly as it does. So welcome back, Steve. Steve was on a little vacation.
Yeah, thanks, man. It was awesome. Yeah, we did a quick trip down. For those of you that are around, I'm in California, so we did a quick trip down to San Diego. Caught in 5 days, 3 baseball games, which was awesome. So you baseball fans out there, we got Dodgers and 2 Petco parks. And if you are a Padres fan, we were there for the walk-off, the Profar walk-off in the bottom of the 10th, which was awesome.
And you got really good seats the one night.
Yeah, it was just me and my older son, who's 13, and so we just jumped on SeatGeek kind of right before the game and got 13 rows back from home plate, which is in Petco there's like this whole section of you're not even really sure how you get to those seats, like very expensive, and you don't even see the gate in, like you got to go through the underground tunnel and whatever. But yeah, so we were pretty close. So it was pretty awesome. I'd never been that close at a professional baseball game, so that was cool.
For as many years as you've been a fan, that's pretty.
Well, I was raised in San Diego, so arguably, I think I went to my first Padres game probably in 1987 or 88. So
wow, that's awesome.
It's been a while. Tony Gwynn era for any of you guys.
Oh yeah,
Benito Santiago kind of days. Steve Garvey, back when Garvey was on the Padres.
Still.
So super cool. So happy to be back. But if I feel a little tired today, it's because we drove. I had to drive that whole San Diego to home trip. I was telling Corey, on a straight shot without any traffic, it's about 6 hours. But you go through LA, so there's traffic, and we had to stop at Knott's Berry Farm on the way. So,
of course,
so it was a journey and a half yesterday. So, but to get this thing rocking and rolling, for those of you that haven't been here, I'm seeing some new faces. We're totally pumped you're here. Really happy to have you, and as part of the VIPs. if you have a question, we love talking about anything and everything, anything from technique questions, tone questions. We already have 2 questions about just gear and whatever coming in, which is awesome. Make sure you just hit your little underneath reactions in the bottom of your Zoom. There's a little hand you can raise. So if you raise that hand, it actually puts you in order for me to see so that we can get you live here on the chat. These are always recorded, so in the future, if you ever miss one, you can always jump in to the Working Class Guitar VIP section. All the recordings are put there. And also, if you have a question but can't make the live, make sure, and we have at least one of those, a couple of those today, or you can email us ahead of time. We'll answer the question for you on the Zoom, and then you can check the replay out in the dashboard, which is a super cool way to do it. And maybe now, we are talking, Corey, should we talk a little bit about our exploration of how the community piece of this, or do we want to leave that till the next Zoom, the next VIP hang?
We can address that later.
Okay, cool.
Because somebody had a question about that very thing.
Cool.
So I
Awesome.
thought we would leave that as a little surprise.
Perfect.
Before we get to Jim, and Marty has a question as well, I'm going to actually pull up a guitar profile to kind of show Marty what we're talking about too. Let's see here. Oh, bear with me, guys.
You're pulling up the Guitar Pro for the Marty question?
For a Marty, yeah. So I got it. It's all good. But what I wanted to say was, since a lot of you got this new, everybody here and everybody who's not here gets the new course with your membership, like always. What you're going to notice is I structured this course to really focus on how to understand the 16th note scratch rhythm. This is really important because I see a lot of people in the late beginner to intermediate stages playing 16th notes. Let's see if I can see myself a little bit better. Playing 16th notes and they're kind of doing this. You're never going to get the full range of motion that way that you need to really get these rhythm parts happening, whether it's that kind of sound, or it's some kind of funkier, like all of that still stems from what we're teaching in the course. And then we talked about briefly before everybody jumped in, if you're playing acoustic rhythm, much different style from, but this, my right hand is still doing the same thing. So that's why we spend quite a lot of time making sure folks understand how to apply the technique to your strumming hand and really understanding the differences, not only between straight and swung 16th notes, but how to play each permutation of them. And then from there, build out and say, well, what if I took the one and the and the E and the and all these different things, and we could start to make our own rhythms. I found that to be a really effective way for me to learn, and I wanted to turn that into a course as well. So, and as you go through the course, you'll start to see like, oh, here's a couple blues rhythms, here's a couple really more up-tempo stuff, some stuff that has some different chords. It should be plenty to keep everybody busy, at least in the first 3 sections about 16th notes and how to apply them. Because once you get that going, you're going to see a difference, and you're not going to want to go back to what you did before. So there you go. That's kind of the reason for the course. And I see Amos is flying in here. And I know that Amos was a big fan of this course before it even launched. So we're glad to have it. So yeah, we might as well just jump in with Jim. So go ahead, Jim, jump on in.
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
How you doing? Good to see you.
Good, likewise.
Corey, just to change the subject a second,
Yeah, sure.
a week or 10 days ago or so on Instagram, you posted a couple of pictures of you making a music video of one of your songs. And
Yeah.
without a lot, I guess you didn't have time to give a lot of detail. What details can you give us about that music video you're working on?
Yeah. So I've been working on some of my own music for a while. Um, and this one song is done. And it takes unless you have everybody on board the same day, the same time, and all the creative energy is in the right place, it can take a long time to get a song recorded and mixed. Because it's like painting a picture or writing a book, like you're going to go over it time and time again just to kind of see, you know, maybe the bass needs to be louder, maybe this guitar part in verse 2 needs to come down. So that's slowly happening, and it costs money too, like, studio time and players. It's not a cheap endeavor. Nashville is one of the cheapest places, believe it or not, to record, but it still takes a lot of time and money to make it happen. Studios are somewhere at minimum around $500 for the day, and then players can be somewhere in the neighborhood of a few $100s a song, which is criminally low, but that's just the way it is. I could certainly try to pay them more, and they would take it, but so you're in for a couple $1,000 at least per song. And so anyway, this song that I wrote it a long time ago. I've been playing it forever, and got it to a place with a producer friend of mine where we really liked it. And he called me up one day and he's like, I really think you should make a music video for this. And I was like, really, you think? He's like, it's funny, it's got good lyrics. I think it would be really cool. So I was like, all right, let me think about it. So I started kind of sussing out like directors, and there's a bunch in Nashville that do this stuff, because they're making music videos here all the time. And I found a guy that I had worked with on a project for a music company a few years back, and then I looked at his resume, his like portfolio, and he did some really, really cool videos. So I had a lot of trust in him. We met once, talked about it. You send him the song, and then what they do is they send you something called a treatment. And a treatment is basically their vision from, 0.001 second till the end of the song of where they see certain things happening, like, band shot here, different shot here. And I kind of looked over it and I was like, I think this is good, and we wanted to try to shoot it all in one day in a performance studio to where we could do, because we're going to do some, obviously, like live band, it's not live, but it's band shots. And then we're going to do some other funny components to it that are me flexing some fun wings. It's going to be cool. Like,
Cool.
we haven't
Cool.
shot any,
So
we haven't shot that
it's
far.
completely independent. You're doing this.
Oh yeah, it's all on my dime. Yeah,
Okay.
100%. I mean,
Okay.
from hiring everybody to buying them lunch, it was,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
we had a couple locations figured out, and then those locations all sort of didn't come to fruition because one was really expensive. They wanted insurance and all that other kind of stuff. So we were like, all right, we got to figure something else out. So I was talking to a friend of mine. He goes, why don't you try to do it at the bar, the Underdog that we play at? And turns out they do a lot of videos there. I've done it. I shot a scene for a Swedish TV show in that bar.
Ah, ah.
And so I knew they did it, and I've gotten pretty good with the owners to where I said, hey, would you mind if we did this? And they're like, no, like people do it all the time. And I was just fingers crossed that they were going to be there at 9 a.m. last Thursday to, or however long ago it was, to open the doors, because the crew was there, I was there, the band was there, and the owner rolled in, and we were ready to rock. So we started setting stuff up, and it was nice to have a real, somebody that really knew what they were doing, in addition to like a lighting person. You got to have an audio playback because they're playing the song through a speaker, and we're basically lip syncing it. And that's how all videos have been made since the dawn of time, for the most part, on the creative side. We did like
Cool.
six or eight takes. Then we did a little funny acting thing, and then we're gonna go to another place and do some other stuff that's not like band performance. So So no timetable on when it's going to come out, but we're
Okay.
we're going to shoot we're going to shoot that second part in July, and then probably try to release it in the fall, I think.
Cool.
But then again, so to give you an idea, like, I like to do things in the most calculated way I can afford to. That means hiring good people, quality product. I could have done it a lot more haphazard than we did, and we could have done it even more elaborate. But it's finding that sweet spot between what I can afford and what works for everybody, and not asking for the moon since it's self-funded. But the next step is I have a friend who's in music PR, and I want to say, hey, here's the video, here's when we want to launch it, can you help us spread it around, as opposed to me just throwing it out there and seeing what happens. But what's going to happen on Working Class Guitar is that any song that I record and release, VIPs will get those songs for free. So we'll have a section. We'll have a section on the site where people have access to the music as well.
That's great.
Yeah.
Can't wait to see it. Can't wait to hear it.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. It's a really, really fun song, and I think it's
great.
Going to be good. So thanks for being so curious and asking, Jim.
Yeah, I think it's cool. That's great.
Yeah, it's the first time I've ever done that. I've been in music videos before, but I've never done my own. So it's the first step into kind of breaking out a little more.
Cool. Thanks, man.
Thanks for asking. Yeah. Good stuff. All right.
Well, awesome. Corey, what if we jumped into Travis's question that he emailed in?
Okay.
I saw Chris put his hand up, put it down, put it back up, so I know he's anxious to get in. But I feel like let's get the Travis's question that he emailed in, because I think this would be a good moment for that, if you're okay with that.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to roll that into we'll have Chris jump in afterwards. So Travis emailed in. He said, if using an EQ pedal, how should you think about the pedal EQ settings versus the amp? He's specifically using a Blues Junior, but let's kind of make that a little more broad.
Right.
And then same question, but with a reverb pedal versus the reverb on the amp. So how do you think about like an EQ pedal? I mean, there's all these videos out there that all the pros use EQ pedals, right? And how you think about that as opposed to the amp, and then reverb also.
I think that an EQ setting or an EQ pedal can be a really, really great clean boost. Even if you set it all flat, that means all of your settings are in the middle. And then you just boost the volume. That can be a really nice tool for an EQ. The amp EQ covers basic settings, basic frequencies, and you're either, let me think, I'm going to screw this up, but generally I think when you turn the knob down, you're cutting the frequency, you're not really boosting it. So I mean, what you're doing is you're kind of, an EQ has a frequency where it's, or this bass, middle, treble has a spot where it's at in a particular frequency range, and you're boosting or cutting that for the most part. I know amp EQ is a little bit different with the filtering and that sort of thing, but you can get a generalized sound that you like in your amplifier from your, bass, middle, treble. It's not as pinpointed as what we would call a graphic EQ. And many of you have seen a graphic EQ with all of the, different frequencies that you can boost or cut. That's kind of what an EQ pedal can help you do. In addition, is that you can pinpoint different frequencies and boost or cut them. So that can further enhance your overall sound. Or it can be a nice Swiss Army knife. Like one time I had to play a travel gig where they kind of screwed up what they call the backline amp, which is a rental amp that they supply you, so you're obviously not flying with your amp. And I got there, and it was this little solid state Vox, and I didn't really like the sound of it. So I had an EQ pedal on my board, and I turned it on, and I just started manipulating the heck out of it till I could get it to sound more like what I wanted to. And that was really useful for that. Because typically what I like to do with the EQ pedal is I do use it as a boost, and I like to maybe boost the 800 hertz frequency. That seems to be a nice low mid-range bump that really helps the guitar speak for solos. Again, to address more of how does it work with the amp EQ, I would get the amp EQ. I'd start with all the knobs straight up and down, and then I'd adjust to taste. Like, you can see this is empty here because I was using it for a rehearsal this morning. But generally, the 2-Rock amps have a ton of bass on them. So the bass knob, I turn almost all the way off. It's crazy because they want to provide enough low end for single coil instruments with the amps. So that's why they have a ton of bass in there. And then those amps have another switch where like the frequency changes of what that bass is, which is pretty interesting. So most amps like a Blues Junior aren't that elaborate. So you could probably put all your EQs at 5 to start with. And from there, you know, say, well, I need a little more bass or a little more low end. But the problem is sometimes bass frequencies on those little amps can be, again, overwhelming, or any amp, it can be overwhelming. So you turn an EQ pedal on, maybe you pull some of that low end out of it, maybe you add some here or there. So it's like an overall equalization of your sound. The problem is that you're EQing. What you're doing is you're coming out of your guitar, you're going into the pedal, you're EQing first, then going in. Even though it all seems to kind of come out of the speaker in the wash, you're technically sending an equalized signal into the amp, and then that's coming out. It would be cool if the EQ was, like, you remember on those old Mesa Boogie amps, they had a parametric of sorts on the amplifier, so you could even get further fine-tuned, like what I'm trying to say. So it's kind of a hard question to answer without being in the room and saying, okay, you can use it to really dial these frequencies in even more so than your amp. That's probably the best way I could say it. But really just have confidence in your ear and what you're hearing, and play chords. And if you're hearing, you know, like some bass frequencies that you don't like, take them out and start to kind of, you know, dial them in. If the amp is too dark, mess with some frequencies and get some chime and get some sparkle happening. But I think it's important when I test amps and pedals, I'm usually like wildly turning the knobs. I want to see the range of what this, you know, product is giving me. So my ultimate advice for the Blues Junior would be play it without the EQ pedal engaged, see if you like the sound. For something that's bothering you, those amps, it's usually low end or a little low mid, and then play with that. Could be a high end issue too with those amps if it's not quite as warm, but I think there's a presence control on them too. So you can bring that down. You know, more options is pretty good sometimes because you can really dial it in. So long-winded answer to that EQ question. I hope that makes sense. It's a little bit tricky sometimes to say what's the best use. Now with reverb, typically Fender amps in the consumer realm, like we'll say Blues Juniors, Hot Rod Deluxes, Hot Rod DeVilles, those reverbs are pretty unruly because you turn it up to 1 from 0 and it's like splash, all this reverb. What's tricky about that is that it's not always the most usable. Sometimes it is, but by and large, most Fender built-in amp reverbs on newer amps over the past, I don't know, 25 years or so, that's been kind of the gripe, is those reverbs explode. And you want them to be a little bit more of a linear taper as opposed to turn it on, boom, blast, a bunch of reverb. It's kind of what happens with them. So a reverb pedal, it depends on what type of reverb the pedal is emitting. That's going to be interesting because you probably want to turn the reverb off at first of the amp and then play around with the pedal. Whether it's you're using a plate style reverb or a spring style reverb, chances are the pedal probably has finer adjustments than the amplifier reverb. Well, it always will because the reverb's just one knob. what's nice about some higher end amps like the 2 Rock has a send and return on the reverb, so you could determine how much signal's being sent to the tank and how much you're listening back to. So you have some more finer adjustments on that. Old Fender reverbs had the dwell control, similar concept there, a send and return. So basically how much reverb and how loud is it is kind of what those knobs mean. One thing about reverb pedals is that the more you put into the reverb pedal, the more the reverb's going to bloom and explode. So if you've got a great clean sound and you have reverb happening and then you hit an overdrive pedal, well, it's going to hit that reverb pedal too, and it's going to make that louder again. So you got to be judicious with how much reverb you want coming, from the pedal in that instance. That's the argument for the reverb in the effects loop, because the only thing that's being affected, how can I say it? The effects loop means tones coming into the amp. It takes a detour, it goes out, hits whatever in the effects loop and comes back and then goes out. Whereas if it's going straight in front of the amp, it's pedals, pedals, pedals going into reverb. And that's all influencing the reverb's output. Now, generally, that's how I've always done it, because I've never really messed around enough with effects loops, probably because it's 2 more cables to hook up with limited time to set your gear up in a club. And that's just always been the case. Although effects loops are fantastic once they're dialed in. They're just great. But most people don't do it because it's a little bit of a pain in the butt. Because if you have to play an amp that doesn't have an effects loop and your rig is wired for that, you're kind of screwed. So, because then you'd have to rewire, your whole rig, essentially. So let's say you have a little bit of reverb on the Blues Junior and you like it, and you say, man, there's some moments where I want to add a really, shimmery atmospheric reverb. Go ahead and add it to the reverb that already exists. You're not even going to notice it. I do that all the time. If I need some big atmospheric reverb, I add it to the reverb that's already on the amp. It doesn't really matter all that much, particularly in a live setting. But if you're going to turn the reverb off on the amp and use something like a J Rocket Boing, which is a 1-knob spring reverb, or a universal audio reverb, or you name it, MXR or something like that, then just use the pedal and turn the amp off if you just like the sound of that particular style of reverb. So yeah, there's a bunch of options for you. Hope that helps. Yeah.
Very cool. Well, Chris Delaney, why don't you jump on in here, my friend?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Hi.
Hey, Chris, hang on one second. One thing I wanted to mention about the EQ thing, because I just saw Jeff making a point about it. I forgot this part.
Yeah.
If you're the kind of person that's going from single coils to humbuckers a lot, an EQ pedal can actually help sort of make it more consistent, because outputs of each will be different. And if you want a similar type of sound from single coils and humbuckers, I know that's kind of weird and redundant, but you could make it less of a volume jump with an EQ pedal. You can really tailor the situation to both guitars. Like maybe the single coils is pedal on, so you get some more output, but then when you go to the humbuckers, pedal off, and you're back to square one. Okay, cool. Thanks, Chris. Just wanted to get that in there.
Yeah. No, that's cool. I was just gonna share something actually with the other VIPs, because I've been doing loads of gigs recently. Like, I've gone from doing 1 a month to 1 a week, and just learned a lot. Is it okay if I just sort of say a few things?
Please. Yeah.
Okay. So just from gigging all the time, one thing I'd say is, like, when you see things online like Instagram and YouTube, and you see these people shredding and you think they're amazing, you mustn't let that intimidate you from kind of going out and doing it yourself, because most people don't play like that, and it's, that's kind of their job. So it's like, have some confidence to go out and do things. And I found with like the theory stuff, if you know your major and minor pentatonic and you know it really well all over the neck, you can get away with a lot. Arpeggios I thought was really useful for learning fingerball, but you don't have to know all that stuff to, be able to get away with it. I spent years playing in a band and I knew like 1.5 positions of the minor pentatonic, and that was it. and that was enough. People say, oh, you played really well. I'm like, I was bluffing. Other things are like bends, like working on your bends is really important. and making sure that they're in tune, and bends and vibrato can be really, really powerful. Sometimes the best bit of a gig is just one note. So it's keeping things really simple. That's another thing. Like
Yeah.
I used to be nervous and just like play loads and loads and loads and no space. Like, so have loads of space. Like that, it's really cool just to stop and then build up some tension and then give the audience kind of what they're waiting for, rather than kind of just shouting at them. Corey had a really good idea, which he told me about a few months ago, about taking the vocal melody. And maybe when you're starting a solo, you could start by using the vocal melody or use the rhythm of the vocal melody. I've been doing that quite a lot recently, and that works really well. Repetition is really cool, like playing an idea up the neck and then maybe playing it again and then swapping the pickup and then maybe playing it in a different octave, changing the rhythm of it. Those kind of things, which they almost sound like they're too simple, but they're really effective. And like simple little tricks, like we do Roadhouse Blues, and there's a whole section in the middle where it's all kind of echoey and spacey. And sometimes I'm just grabbing the pick and like scratching up and down the neck, and the audience goes crazy and they just love it. You know, lots of overdrive play and stuff. And you don't have to spend hours practicing it. It's just like a kind of trick. You know, it sort of shows that you've got some confidence and those sorts of things. And that often gets much more of a shout than, you know, playing fast stuff or whatever. And the final thing I'd say is like being in a band like helps so much. Like if you're out gigging or if you maybe go to an open mic, it's really, really good. It totally elevates your playing. I can tell if we're gigging a lot, you just get better very quickly just by actually getting out and doing it. So yeah, there you go. That's just some tips.
Man, those are all right. I mean, talk about hitting the nail on the head. Like that is perfect, because there are a few ways to play music. There's playing music in the way that a lot of us probably are doing, where we're practicing and we're probably alone. And and we know, and I know you can speak to this, Chris, because most of what you practice goes out the window once you start playing the gig, you know, and you rely on, it's kind of like you got a life preserver here. This is your life preserver, and you got to just play what you know to get to the finish line of the song or the solo. And that might not mean that you have to play, that you worked in what you've been practicing. It takes a while to get things that you're practicing into that stream of consciousness for live playing. And I think even if you got together with another guitar player or a bass player or a keyboard player, like you'd realize like, wow, there's not as much room to do all the things I have wanted to do in one song. You know, rock music, blues music. The cool thing about blues and rock is you can have extended sections where you are soloing or improvising and you can try things, you know, but if you're paying attention to the overall like presentation of the performance, like Chris is doing, he's realizing that like, man, like simple is just as effective as it ever was. Yeah. And I record almost every show I play for that reason. And man, it's hard when you've worked up a level of ability that I want to like push it as far as I can in a live situation. But then I watch back sometimes and I'm like, man, I just fell on my face there because I tried to do something that I shouldn't have done. Because I got bored, you know, and I'm like, but the people never heard you before, so they're not bored, you know. So that's another huge thing, and everything you're saying is right on the money, and it's great to like, and that's why the courses that I put out, I'm 100% confident that everything in them is usable in this instance. We will put out stuff where it's like, oh, that's going to be a little over our heads, but in good conscience, I want to teach it. So it's all about making music with what we're learning here and inspiring us to just learn, but rest on what we already feel good about to really make the music the most important thing. And confidence is important. You're going to be confident at something. And if it's confident at playing 3 chords, just bury it, like just murder it, go for it. Or if you know one minor pentatonic position, you know, I've made lessons on how we just make music out of staying in that. So if it's good enough for some of our heroes, it should be good enough for us too. I think what Chris is also pointing out is that we do see all of these, you know, I call them, you know, athletic or acrobatic guitarists, but it's like, I've never been on a situation musically where any of that stuff has ever worked outside of their own music. Ever. Like 100%. Like, geez, I'm going to do some sessions tomorrow and Sunday that came up where I know most of my life is going to be going. I'm going to play little simple things because this woman's music is the most important thing, and I got to pick these simple little guitar things to play. And that's when the rubber meets the road for me. It's like, okay, step back, don't listen to yourself. What does this song need? What does it sound like? Oh, it sounds like this Fleetwood Mac song. All right, I'm going to try and pull some elements of that into it. I guess my point is like, when you're presented with the musical situation, you have to kind of choose what's best for it. And we as guitar players get impressed by others doing this amazing stuff, but that amazing stuff 9 out of 10 times doesn't translate to anything other than an acrobatic performance. And it's just, I've seen it time and time again. I'll never forget, like I've known Tim Pierce for years, and we're both noodling, and he's not playing anything I couldn't play. I'm like, but I saw him do a session once, and it was like Jekyll and Hyde. He became this guitar player and musician that I'd never seen before. I knew he could do it because I've heard him on a million records, but I was like, wow, he is all business. And it turned into the best thing ever because he just played so appropriately for that moment and didn't do anything. He might have gone when we were sitting there, but when he played the track, it was this beautiful composed thing. I was like, that's a pro, and we don't have to be pros. I mean, but we can take the inspiration from them and say, wow, they played what needed to be played at that time, and you do that on stage or in the studio. So playing with someone, if you have a neighbor or a friend, man, it's like somebody took your training wheels off your bike, and I got to keep this thing afloat. I got to keep this thing on 2 wheels, and that's what you have to do when you're playing live, right, Chris?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think one of the things you've done for me is just to keep it interesting. It's that as well, because people can tell if you look bored and you're not really interested. If you're kind of just going through the motions, that can be a real negative. But if you're excited and you've got something new to play, that can really help as well. So being, that sort of being alive and being aware that you're entertaining people.
Yeah, like let's say, for instance, a mountain of information, a mountain of usage can be had with a minuscule amount of knowledge. And what I mean by that is, we've talked so much about arpeggios on this here at the Working Class Guitar, and it might be something you play when the band goes and you go, and that's all you took from it was that 3-note thing, right? But it's solidified now because you did it on the gig or you did it with your friend or whatever. Yeah. And that's how I bring new stuff. I front my band, so I'm singing and playing, and I have to find times to say, when can I put this into this song? Oh, okay. There's a moment here where the keyboard player is soloing. I want to try these little chord movements that I've been working on, see if they work. And I might do 2 of them that work. And then the next time I might get another 2. You know what I mean? So it's these little building blocks of stuff, and that's what it takes. So we can't all play gigs in pubs, but it certainly helps solidify the information, and you're coming up with all these perfect anecdotes that everybody who's ever done live playing will relate to.
Yeah, like if you go to an open mic and you meet people, that's how I started off. You just,
oh, good.
Get to know the house band and stuff, and that was how it worked out for me. So yeah, it's fun.
Well, if you might have seen recently, I did a video with Mitch Gallagher from Sweetwater. Yeah, we were talking about, like things to make your blues jam better when you go to the blues jam, and one of the things I feel kind of, I don't say I don't like to see, but sometimes I can tell people they're practicing at the jam. They're trying to work out some fun lick that they worked on, right? And it comes off flat when if they just would have played what they know, you only have 1 or 2 songs at a jam. So really be confident and play what you know. Forget the stuff that you worked on in the lesson room. Bring the big guns that you feel good about. I don't care if it's the same. If you're playing it with confidence, people are really gonna get it. I've seen people try to play every lick they know in one song, and it's look, I'm guilty too, but playing what you know with confidence will really come out more than you realize.
Yeah, what you just played was spot on. That kind of simple stuff works really well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's all music dependent too. I know a lot of us want to be. I was thinking about this a lot the other day. We listen to guitar players online that we really like and that have really good stuff pulled together. Think about the context in which they're doing it. They're doing it over music they feel comfortable with or that works for them. You know what I mean? I've heard people who are amazing country players play through a Marshall and sound terrible. I've heard people that are great blues players try to play over a country train beat. They lose it. They can't do it. It's not their neighborhood. It's okay. You know, I get, drop me into a foreign country. I'll be lost too. It's the same kind of thing. So when you're seeing people who just sound amazing, watch 5 or 6 of their videos and see if the material doesn't all sound the same. And I encourage you to do that.
Okay.
So yeah, man, that's great stuff. Thanks, Chris.
All right, thank you.
You're the man. We love having you here.
Awesome. Well, Amos has had his hand up for quite a. Your shoulder's probably getting tired there, my friend. So why don't you jump on in?
Your digital shoulder.
A little bit.
Digital.
That was a great conversation. I appreciate Chris
great.
bringing that up in the fashion he brought that up. That was so good. It reminded me of something I was trying to figure out. Listening to people that I like, I knew I was trying to put in more than they were. And one of them, my favorite players, is Snowy White. And I was sitting and listening to him. I decided to really focus and try to listen. And I didn't realize before I was just hearing it. I wasn't listening, and he a lot of his playing is very minimalist. And one thing I started to notice, he was holding notes longer than I was, instead of jumping around. And I thought, gosh, he just played 3 or 4 notes, and it was one of my favorite parts of the song. But somewhere in my mind, I thought he was playing a lot, but he was just holding the notes longer. So that was a good lesson for me. Um,
Yeah.
but what I was wanting to ask you is 2 things. You had a video on YouTube and you were showing how to get basically from one key to the next, just using basic chords. And that's very intimidating when you start, changing keys. And but it wasn't really about changing keys. Let's say you're playing a G, C, D. Most songs you start out like you said. You wrote a song, and I've written some songs, and you basically start out with that 3-chord progression and move on from there. And and let's say you get into a situation you need a chord outside of that key. And I don't know if you remember the video I'm talking about. I don't think it's that old. I should have.
Oh man, I don't remember. I usually have a
And
pretty
you
photographic
basically
memory
what you
for
were
that
saying
stuff.
was something like, let's say you're playing a G C D, but you want to put an A chord in there. Okay,
Okay.
an A minor won't do it. And so when you hit that D chord, you can easily move to an A chord. You can do G, D, G, A, and I'd seen this once before, and it clicked into place that I was listening to Jimi Hendrix play "Hey Joe," and
Yeah.
he starts out on a C chord, just basic chords, and he goes to a G to a D, so he's in the key of G. And I said, all right, and he goes from the 4th to the 1 to the 5th, but the 5th is the 4th
Yep.
of A.
Yep.
And I thought, oh, that is so slick and it's so simple.
Very simple.
And
Yeah.
you were doing something like that, and and that was something I thought, man, that is really much more simple than we think it is. And keeping it simple, like you guys are talking about right here. You're talking about keeping
Right.
things kind of simple. And I don't know if you want to elaborate on that or not.
Well, you know, that's the tricky part. That's why playing music is as important as learning music, because, you know, we take those chords. So, like, just about all of those chords are in the key of G, except for the A. But the reason it works for him when he's soloing is because that E minor pentatonic covers most of those chords and notes,
Yes.
and even the A. So it does work because we're not so focused on. It's not going, which would work, but not quite as well. Doesn't have quite the impact that the A major has, for sure. But yeah, I mean, as far as keeping it simple in your chord progressions, I mean, I don't know, just we don't always have to have an answer as to why something just works. You know, I'm working on a song for this session tomorrow. Let's see at the chart right there. It's that might not be the right one, but there's one of those situations where it sounds like it's an E minor or G, but there's an A in it all the time, and that's a compositional trick to change one of those scale degrees to a chord that's not diatonic, whether it's major. Like if you're in G major, your 2 is normally minor. You can make it major or dominant. It's gonna be, you know, it's gonna be quite common to hear that in a lot of, particularly rock songs too, because rock songs break the mold quite a bit. So yeah, it's one of those break the rules, learn the rules and break them, I guess, kind of thing. But
Also, it's like
yeah,
Chris was saying, he was playing those same chords over and over and over. Of course, he's doing fills between them, but he keeps moving those chords up the neck, and so
mhm.
you get a hearing in your head that it's actually a bunch of different chords, you know, but it's basically the same chords in different octaves.
Yeah,
And one
different
question I
inversions.
was going
Yeah,
to ask, we're hearing a lot of stuff today about all these pickups. I mean, the price of them are going through the roof, you know.
I know.
And there
Yeah.
was a guy I was listening to on YouTube, and he's some kind of sound engineer, and he's very controversial because he says outrageous things, but he's a heavy metal dude, and
Oh, is
he
that
said he don't give a
was it
damn what you think,
Glenn?
he'll just cuss you out, huh?
Is that Glenn?
You
The
got the
guy
real
with
long
the
hair,
long hair? Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. And
Oh
of course,
yeah,
he
I
don't
met
care
him.
what you say, you know.
Yeah.
And he was testing all these different pickups, and he had some kind of software he was running them through. And they were basically, he said, guys, they're basically the same thing. All these different, and you hear all these different things. But he said what you were the first conversation about. He said, if you really want to change the sound of your pickups, EQ. And then I heard Uncle Larry the other day saying he uses like 3 EQ pedals, and he basically said the same thing. If you know how to set them, you can get whatever sound you want. So that's where
Yeah.
it was.
Yeah, I mean, you got to listen to, one of the cool things you can do, back to the EQ thing, was just play a chord, turn that EQ pedal on, and then just start running the faders up and down and
Yeah.
hear what all those frequencies do. That's actually how they train. That's a training tool for audio engineers. There used to be this course like 20 years ago. You could buy it on CD. It was called Golden Ears. And what they would do is they would shoot pink noise, which is just static. And they do that, and then you run that through an EQ, and it goes, and it's all these frequencies, and you start to train your ears to go, oh, that sounds like 1K. 1K probably sounds more like that, whereas the low end was much deeper, sounding. And that's a good way to train yourself. It's like ear training for frequencies, and that's what an EQ pedal can really do, is just go through those and listen to each one and say, okay, well, that's also good for getting rid of frequencies. Actually, EQing has a lot more to do with taking away than boosting. Audio engineers and mixing engineers will tell you that if they can find the frequencies to get rid of, they will. For instance, like it might sound good to have a lot of low end when you're playing electric guitar because it feels good, but in a mix, that's going to complete with the bass guitar, the keyboards, the bass drum. So you'll see what something is called a high pass filter. And what that means is you set it to where frequencies from a certain frequency point and below are cut out and the rest go through. And you can adjust that to taste. Like I'll put a high pass filter on electric guitar that cuts from like 120 hertz and below, and it still doesn't affect the tone. You can start to hear when it's like, oh, that's starting to pull tone away. It's not as rich anymore. I got to bring it back. So those kinds of tools are super useful. Yeah. And for someone that's done as many sessions as Tom has done, his ears are finally tuned to that because he knows, I mean, it can be a switch of a pickup will get you a different frequency because of where it's located on the guitar, you know? So that in and of itself is also EQing, you know, because of.
So is that why you see a lot of players, guitar players on the pro level, they don't use those two lowest strings as much, is to
Right.
keep it from muddying everything up?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good point.
Yeah, but if you listen to like a solo jazz guitar player, he or she is using the whole breadth of the instrument. Do you know what I mean? Whereas in a rock or pop or R&B or country, you're staying up on the higher middle strings a lot of times because you just want to get out of that mud, unless you're playing a solo or something. Yeah, it's a great way for all of the instruments to kind of sit and be happy frequency wise too. Definitely.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Hey, how's those yoga classes going?
Oh man, I've been slacking.
Oh, you got to get it back, man.
I know a couple things happened. The place shut down. They lost their lease, and then a couple of the teachers moved to a different spot, and we just weren't enjoying the spot as much. So it's the only one near us. And there's tons of yoga places in Nashville, but traffic is usually so rough that we don't want it to be a 3-hour event. So we'll get back to it. But man, we were bummed because we really liked that place. Hey, did you check out the new course yet, Amos? I made that just for you, you know.
I knew you was going to make one just for me, but I haven't seen it yet. I was just on there yesterday, I think.
Yeah, we dropped it this morning.
Oh, okay.
It should be there now. Yeah, the funk rhythm course has landed.
Oh, I'll be checking it right after.
Yeah, I think you'll really like it. Yeah.
Good deal, man.
All righty.
Awesome. Well, Jeff, I see your hand up. Why don't you jump in here, and then we'll grab a couple questions from the chat.
All righty then. Time for the gear corner. I bought this Jones Hylotron for my Hollow Body the Hard Way project, which is coming along.
Look at you.
All hollowed out and everything.
Wow.
Coming around. Anyway, I bought this because I really like the sound of it in my Gretsch Tennessee Rose. I mean, it's the short scale model with no F holes, so it's just beautiful sound. And I thought, okay, I want a similar sound or the same sound in this guitar. My question is, you've probably had the opportunity to play guitars from different manufacturers with the same pickup in the same location, I'm assuming. And so can you comment on what sort of a difference or similarity I can expect putting this same pickup in an entirely different guitar?
Well, I think you're going to get similar results because a pickup is like a microphone. So it's going to get as much of the characteristic of the instrument, I think, as it can. With a Gretsch, so you're putting that Hylotron in what guitar?
In this guitar, in the Hollow Body the Hard Way
okay.
project.
Yeah, so, a guitar is the sum of its parts. But when it comes to pickups, some different things are going to be replicated. With the Gretsch 6119 Tennessee Rose, there's air moving in that guitar. It's fully hollow. I think that one's fully hollow. The one I had was, so that means there's no center block running through the middle of the guitar. So you're going to hear that air come through the pickups. Like I can hear it on this guitar, being that it's hollow. Even down, it's loud. It doesn't have quite the thick punch that like a telly would have. But excuse me. So you won't get quite that sound of the Gretsch through the telly, obviously. Smaller guitar, not as much surface area, not as much air moving around. That's a hollow telly. It's going to have some similar characteristics, I think. So I think you're going to get close. It's not going to be the same guitar, because then scale length is a different thing too. If you make it normal Fender scale, it's going to have a little bit twangier, punchier thing, because the strings are longer and more taut, whereas the shorter scale has a little more floppier sound. So those are the things I think you would really notice: string tension, body size, and that sort of thing. I mean, I know people will say you could put a pickup on a broomstick and it would sound, you would get a sound from it, but that's the reason all those guitars are back there. They all do different jobs. I mean, I was just thinking about that the other day. I'm like, well, I'm a collector now, I guess. But then I got called for these 2 sessions, and I'm like, all right, I got to pull out some interesting guitars for this music that she wants to play, and started doing some things. And, I was like, well, I'm always glad I have the tools. You might not always use, the nail gun, but when you need it, you're glad you have it. So that's kind of how I look at guitars for my line of work.
That's cool. Well, thank you. That's what I wanted to hear.
Yeah, you'll get in the ballpark.
Yeah, that's good. I put the short scale on the Hollow Body the Hard Way project.
Okay.
Based on our discussion last hang about scale length, I started really looking at that, and that's you're right. It's really important. All the guitars that I like to play have the same scale length, so it's very interesting. Thank you, man. I appreciate your advice. My
pleasure. I've gravitated towards the shorter scale over the years. That's just when I play a Fender style scale, it almost feels foreign to me now, which is kind of weird, but whatever works. That's why it's also nice about the PRS stuff is kind of right in the middle. So that's interesting as well. But Steve, I had another one that came in from it was Jeff. I don't know his last name. I can't see it. But he's got some important things he wants to mention. Are you seeing that one, Steve?
I'm not.
Okay. So one of the things he wants to say is he talks about offering a yearly subscription or a lifetime membership. And we don't offer that. I don't think we will anytime soon, but you're the boss, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
That was me, Corey.
Oh, was that you, Jeff? Oh, okay.
Well, Jeff, why don't you ask me the question, and we could just hammer it out right here. I mean, I feel like let's hear from the horse's mouth.
Actually, to tell you the truth, I can't remember what I wrote.
I got it right in front of me. Well, he talked about he said he's been mooching some free content for the year, so he wanted to pay for some, so he's happy to pay. You don't strike me as a mooch, Jeff. But yeah, I don't see us doing a lifetime membership at the moment. And I don't know if that's like economy driven or what, Steve, like.
Well, yeah, I'll make a couple comments on this just because I've had some experience with going down this road in other facets. But, one of the exciting things to us, and I think to Corey and I, about the monthly membership is you get people that are more engaged when there's kind of a monthly thing happening. And so there's a tendency when you pay for something one time and maybe you're engaged for 3 or 4 months, and then it's both sides of the equation. Like if we just charged everybody a lifetime membership, well, there's no incentive for us to keep building out the site. And then most people will get really excited for 2 or 3 months, and then it just kind of, they move on to the next thing. They've paid some amount and it's not hitting their bank account. But as you guys that are, have been around working class guitar for a long time, every one of these Zoom calls, there's a bunch of new people that we're really excited to bring into the community. And like, there's a great, like, tenure and legacy kind of building up here on these calls, and even through the emails Corey and I get, and just the comments that we see come over. So I think the heart of what we're trying to build is an engagement to, which is also why we've kept the price at what the price is. It's like what's a reasonable price where somebody could go, hey, this totally is way more value on a monthly basis than what I'm paying. And so I definitely don't see the lifetime thing, because there's, once again, the ones that I've seen, the people that have done big lifetime ones actually generally back away from that and don't offer that anymore. So all of the lifetime subscriptions I've had in my life, in the music space especially, now no longer offer those, because they realize there's a kind of an imbalance on both sides with the lifetime membership. So I don't see that. We could potentially do an annual, but once again, the hard part is that we just like the pricing to feel. We just want you to feel like, man, I'm getting a lot of value for this, like that, and that's and that's kind of our real heart there. So I think that's pretty much where we land with that. But you guys will always be the first to know if something changes with that.
Those are all good points, Steve. Thanks.
Yeah, and just because I like to be transparent as possible with you guys, like I get excited saying, okay, like, all right, what are the VIPs getting this month? Okay, they're getting a new course on this, and it really it keeps my fire burning to. I mean, we're human. We're all humans, and we would want to take a month off and then just watch you guys pay for the same old shit. Like, no, I want to give you something new. 9 months, hopefully, out of the year, at least, if not 12. Like, if I didn't have anything else to do, this is my number one priority, is working with you guys. But sometimes getting a course to the finish line every month is a challenge. But I'll tell you, when I talk to my contemporaries and I say, well, I put out a course almost every month if I can, some variety of things, and they look at me like, how do you do that? And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I just find the material and I do it, and it goes to show, it proves to me like I have a lot to share, and there's a lot of different angles we can approach to learn music and the guitar. So I want to keep putting out as consistent content as possible. And when I know I got people monthly paying me to do so, it's like, all right, back to the woodshed, and that's important for me. I think there's a accountability factor there that I want to maintain as well. So, yeah. But a couple other things you said, Jeff, and I'm going to leave the important one for Steve on the last one. You talked about chromatic mediant chords, and that is like some wild stuff. Chromatic mediants, I don't know that much about because I don't use that very much. But having a little bit of knowledge I do have, it is fun for composing. Go Google some chromatic mediant stuff to everybody if you haven't. It's really interesting because it's basically, if you have the tonic of a key, like the key of C, you build a chord off of it from a third above. Now in the key of C, that would be an E minor. But that's actually not called a chromatic mediant. I think that's called a diatonic mediant when it's in the key. But if it wanted to be a chromatic mediant, you would make it an E major chord. And you hear composers do this, and there's 6 or 8 mediants for every tonic. You could also do a chord a minor third away, and you hear that in like Danny Elfman or somebody who's like a composer for film. Well, they might play. Where you play these two chords that seem very far away from each other, but have this interesting power to them. So that being said, Jeff, it's not something I do that often at all.
Understood.
Yeah.
Chromatic media seem to, from what I've been reading, seems to come up a lot in film scores.
Exactly, because it's
which
moody.
is the example you use. But seems to me it'd be interesting passing chords. Just not to dwell on, just touch on when you're going between chords might be interesting to look at. So that's what I'm exploring.
You could if you're playing C and you want to go to D minor, you could play an E flat minor before it. Or you could play which is an E flat major, D minor to the C, and that sounds really cool. Yeah, different kinds of stuff. Anyway, yeah, good stuff. Okay, the final thing, Steve, you're welcome, Jeff, that I want to have Steve talk about. He said, I want to use your words. I love how you qualify it, Jeff. Probably a pain in the neck or someplace lower to implement or administer a member forum or community. And we're getting closer to that. So, Steve.
Oh, Jeff, it's like we talked about this. It's like you're setting me up here. It's amazing. So we do have some actually really exciting news about, and I don't want to use the wrong word here, so you'll have to work with me on the whiteboard here, but about a member community, more of an organic, place where everybody can kind of go. So for those of you that don't know, we use Teachable as our platform for courses. I'm going to go a little deeper on this conversation because that's what this VIP hang is for. You guys are the heartbeat of this thing, so we love talking about the deep things of this so you know exactly what's happening. They used to, when we first started talking about this back in the day, and Jeff, you probably remember this, they had what they called a direct integration with a platform called Circle. We had tested out the Circle integration. It was a little clumsy and just a little, but Circle is essentially a community piece of software that you'd have Teachable and Circle, and they were supposed to have single sign-on, and it was kind of supposed to work and act together. It wasn't clean enough for Corey and I to feel comfortable saying yes, we need to do this. Well, fortunately, Teachable in the last 2 or 3 months has actually released their own community product. That's a direct Teachable product. And my take on it is Teachable was probably having a lot of feedback from people with that integration of we want this, but this is a little clumsy. I mean, this is just my opinion because it's very, very similar to the feature set of Circle. And I think Teachable just told their engineers build that, but make it Teachable and make it just part of the thing, So we have actually, in the back end of the site, we actually have the test community already spun up and are working, just going through the details of it. Our hope, and I'm knocking on wood here, is that by next VIP live hang, we're going to kind of potentially have you guys kind of come in and do some testing with us. We're still a little bit defining what that's going to be. So I don't think, it's tough because, to your point, moderating what we would think of as a forum isn't really something that we feel is really moving people forward. We don't want it to just turn into a place of another gear page or something like that. But we have come up with some pretty cool ideas about, Corey posting a video on a little lesson, hey, learn this lick, and then we can all kind of learn it with him and post our videos and learn from each other and what we're doing, and hey, how'd you get that sound, and kind of build more community where we can be learning guitar together versus just another gear page kind of thing. So those are some of the things we're trying to really hone in on. But we are if we were, Jeff, if last VIP call we were this close, we're this close now.
Yep.
So it's coming. We're super pumped. I'm the features that Teachable has brought to the table. One thing everybody will have to remember is this is a newer product for them. One thing I really like about Teachable is every month we get these emails. Here's all the new things we're adding. Here's all the new stuff happening. So, if it doesn't exist now, it probably will later. But we're excited as we're honing that in on what that's going to be, that you guys will have access to that in the near future. So
yeah, I mean, it might even be a thing where we focus next month, Steve, on really trying to get that popping. And you know, in the previous conversation, I was like, I'm putting a course out every month, you know, but it's like that might be the month where we really try to get this spun up so everybody can really be enjoying it. I'd love to have a section on there where anyone who is confident or comfortable enough to put some stuff, hey, I learned this from Corey's course, this lesson, blah blah blah, and they post themselves, and that would be an even better opportunity for me to help chime in and say, hey, that's great, you know, watch your timing on this, you're rushing a little bit, that happens to everybody, you know. So it's a way that I could almost like, you know, help further by proxy. And I think that could be really exciting. That's something I want to do, is get everybody to be posting stuff when they can, and like, hey, what do you think of this, Corey? What do you think of this, Steve? And then everybody can help each other out too. Like the friendliest Facebook group you've ever been in, which is none of them. Yeah, I'm super excited about that. And I just started poking around with it a little bit, Steve, because Steve's been kind of digging in. So this morning I was looking at it too.
Cool. And I do want to say, like, the other thing, like when you go into working class guitar right now, you know, we have a section that's like VIP only videos and like all, and like the Zoom replays. Those live much more in a much more, it feels more, I'm about to say a sentence, it's not a sentence, but it feels more right for those to be in something like this community feature that Teachable has. So the cool thing is you'd be able to go there. We'd always have I think all the Zoom replays are going to end up getting put in there. All the Zoom links are going to be there. So if you ever we've had some people where it's like, oh my gosh, the Zoom link got filtered into my junk mail or something. You would always know, here's a Zoom link for here's the next Zoom call. Here's the link for that call. You never have to wait for an email. It would always be there. So there's a place for, it just feels like a much better place for other content we're giving you guys now, where you'd have one place to go. You'd be able to log in. Oh, cool. Here's a VIP only video. Oh, cool. Here's like a lick that we're all learning. Oh, cool. Here's the next VIP live hang. Like all that VIP only, very specific stuff would live there.
Yeah, and you could post videos of yourself asking questions for the VIP too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If something, you know, dawns on you and you don't want to type it, and you say, sometimes it's easier to convey something via video and speech than it is via text. So I think any of that is going to be fair game. It's going to be fun.
That's tremendously exciting news. Thank you for all your hard work on that.
Of course. Yeah, I mean, we're continually trying to make the experience on our site is valuable for everybody. I mean, just from course to course, I can see like, oh, this course was way better than a previous one, layout wise, asset wise. Cause you know, I think of everybody, people are, you know, some people like the assets in one place. Some people like them in another. Some people like, you know, things really slow. Some people like them up to speed. You know, there's a lot of things to think about when you're talking about, oh geez, we have like some kind of, we're over like 10,000 users on the site, I think, Steve, somewhere around there. Because I just went to the user tab when I was, I think I was searching for somebody to help them with a support thing. I was like, wow, we got a lot of people that have at least stopped by. That doesn't mean 10,000 people are VIPs. That would, if that was the case, we'd be doing this Zoom call from my yacht. But well, that'd be great. Then we can have.
We'd all be on the yacht. Everybody would get tickets to the yacht.
Yeah.
We would be doing Zoom calls on the yacht.
We drive around the country, pick you guys up, come back down to Florida, you know, all that stuff. Anyway, there's a couple things we missed before we jump off. Early, but when we just started the call, Marty said he reviewed the section, the new funk course, might be covered later in the course. How are swing 16th notes rhythm notated on a score? I usually see swing in eighth note notation. There is, that's why I pulled Guitar Pro up. When you see, oh, sorry guys, I'm trying to find the share screen thing here. Share screen, there we go. Guitar Pro. Oh, open system preferences. Oh, there we go, sorry. It's asking for a password now, hold on. It's because I have a new computer and I haven't used, oh, it's not gonna let me do it because I have to quit. Oh, maybe not, maybe it'll let me do it, hold on. Oh, now it's letting me. Good. Stand by. Okay. So classic funk grooves. This is in the course here. Here is your notation for if it's a swung 16th. This is when it goes back to normal. So that's, even though it's eighth notes, that's that's it notating that we're back to a straight feel. That is when we're going to be swinging the 16th notes. And in Guitar Pro, you do that here. So when I want to do a shuffle, I use triplet eighth there, and that makes the eighth notes still look like eighth notes, but not feel or sound like eighth notes. And I just think that's one of those worth its weight in gold kind of things of the funk course, is the 16th note rhythms that I like to go 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a. So my quarter note is here, my foot, 1, 2, 3, 4, 16th. That's straight 16th note. If I shuffled them or swung them, and we do different versions of it. We do straight, we do swung, and there's an example I just revisited before I launched the course where I'm playing like, or it's this one right here. Let's do it while we're here. Share screen, bring this up. It's this first one here. One. So that example right there is where I'm playing, and I played it straight, but in the course it's swung. It goes. So checka 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 is the swung feel, and one of the things I do in the lesson as I speed it up and go, okay, now it should make sense if I go. So you start to feel the swung 16th note more than understand it on paper, and I think that's actually the most important thing. All right, Amos is into the news course. That's great. Jeff Bailey's really into the community. I know Jonathan Bird, who usually jumps on here, is into that too. He's been asking for a long time, and I'm happy to actually have an outlet for it. Hey, Marty, you're welcome. Thanks for sticking with us with that. Yeah, pay attention to straight and swung 16th notes. It's really, really important. Yeah.
Now everybody has something to work on this weekend, but I did have one other question come across that we can that we have with the last couple minutes we have here. So Chris, you're on here. Chris, why don't you just unmute yourself and ask the question that you direct messaged me on the if you have a mic. You have a mic on the, there you go.
Can you hear me now, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, no, what I was looking for was really, I'm looking for wooden covers for pickups. Does anyone know where they're made or can be made?
Oh,
I've seen wooden pickups in basses and things like that, but for a particular project I want to get wooden covers for a particular, for humbuckers, yeah?
I've never seen them for humbuckers. That's an interesting idea. Steve, any?
And this is going to sound crazy. So I think you have two options, Chris. Because I saw your question come over, so I did a little side Googling while we were doing this. So I think you kind of have two options. One, some pickup covers that kind of look like wood, depending on what the project is. Because the wood's going to impact the tone to some level, depending on the thickness, whatever. But I actually think something like Etsy kind of becomes your answer.
There you go.
So I looked on Stu Mac. I wanted to see if they had any, just all that stuff. But anything I'm seeing, most of this stuff.
No, I've seen the Etsy ones. I'm not sure they kind of look okay on picture, but I'm not sure in real life would they do the trick.
Do the trick, yeah. And there's a couple on Reverb. I don't know if you looked on Reverb for wood pickup covers.
Around, but I can't find a manufacturer that will say, look, we sell these. This is what you ask for. Give me.
Well, and I don't think this actually is a much bigger conversation, Chris, than you realize, because I'll give my 2 cents, and then Corey, you can give your 2 cents.
Okay.
I don't think you're going to find a manufacturer that says we manufacture these. And I think the reason in this, outside of a artisan kind of boutique-y onesie twosie kind of thing, because you have to remember the guitar world specifically is very, very traditional. And the conversations that the internet has created around tone and tone wood and pickup and magnets and all that stuff, I just don't think if somebody said, okay, I'm going to make 10,000 of these, I just don't think you're going to get 10,000 sold. And it would take that, it takes those kinds of numbers for somebody to go, hey, like, I'm going to do this. And then you start talking about the different spacing of pickups and humbuckers versus P90s versus single coils. And so we run into this a lot. It's interesting because the bass guitar space, like the bass community is much more forward thinking about things than the guitar space, generally speaking. We all still just want a 59 Les Paul, like that's kind of what we're all like, or a 57 Strat or whatever, And so when you start getting outside of the metaphoric box and like, hey, I want this super cool thing, and I can tell you, Corey and I both have worked in the industry. We've both, I've worked on the manufacturer. We both worked with manufacturers on the manufacturing side. And like, when I was at Ernie Ball Music Man, the number one selling thing is a black Stingray 4-string bass. Like that is, outside of all the other cool stuff, I used to do the factory tours there, and you'd see these things that are just so cool. And you're like, why isn't this? It's like, no, we'll just order 1,000 black Stingray basses, And I know, like, on the bass side, like, but I'm just saying, like, there's just a general, once again, that's my take. I think we just have a general traditionalism that there is a segment that is really into the new cool stuff and all of that. But I think that's why you're going to kind of either have to find, somebody that does wood, like, does that kind of carving and wood carving and just have them make them for you, because that could be super cool.
Yeah.
Or just, hopefully you find something on Reverb or Etsy or something that matches. But it would be tough to have like a Seymour Duncan or DiMarzio be like, we're making wood pickup covers now. So
I mean, you see, I played bass as well, and there was a Birmingham guy, John Diggins, used to make a JD bass who had fabulous wood in it, and the pickups were wooden covered, right? And they were actually fabulous looking, right? And it made no difference to tone now at all. It seemed to work. But so I was kind of wondering why they wouldn't have done the same with guitar. But you've probably answered my question, yeah.
Hey, I found these are sold, but boy, I thought those looked pretty cool.
Well, they certainly do. Indeed, I've never seen them before.
Yeah, that's on Reverb, but they're sold. But that might be your best place, because then you could maybe, whoever Guilford Guitars in Illinois.
Yeah,
that might be someone you could.
Maybe I get in contact with them. That's good. Yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah, of course. Let me stop my share real quick here.
Well, then you buy 1,000. Now you just contract them to do 1,000 pieces, and you become the guy.
Yeah, you become the dealer.
You're the guy. So
we had a
career change.
One of our loyal VIPs, Carl Clappison, said, and a lot of people ask about a suggested learning path of the material. I'm always 50-50 on that, because there's no one size fits all process to learning. But maybe there is a video that I could upload that when somebody asks, I could say, hey, check this out. And, talk about maybe the benefits of working on this number of courses. My dream was, when we started Working Class Guitar, and it started earlier when I started making courses with Brett Papa and Eric Andreas, because I knew we'd get those courses someday in our library, was like, all right, we're going to do the beginner, the intermediate, the, blah, 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 step it up from there. And we kind of have that with like beginner blues rhythm, intermediate blues rhythm, blues guitar by yourself, complete blues volume 1, blues beyond the basics, then the whole arpeggio world. I think the thing that's tricky about a path is that the path winds and meanders. Like, it's tough to say, like, I'm going to get here, and when I get to the end, I'm going to have a straight line of knowledge. really doesn't happen with music. And I heard some really like heavy jazz instructors talk about that. And it made me happy that like I had the same mindset where I look at it as like, you know, you're kind of, to me, I'm like in this sci-fi mode of like I'm walking down this path and then boom, like I get hit with this information from here and then I get hits again, like, so, oh, here's some rhythm lessons, oh, here's some lead stuff, and I keep going down this path and stuff keeps hitting me, and then I might turn this way and a whole new set of things happen, then I come back and a whole new set of information comes. That's to me what the path really is. That's been my journey. I mean, I started out as a blues, classic rock young guy, and then I can tell you pinpoints. Oh, I remembered when my guitar teacher said, "You've never heard of Robin Ford? Check this out." Sent me home with a record. Boom. That changed my life. And then I went and went that way a little bit. And then I moved to a town that had a bunch of great musicians. And they said, "Oh, you've never heard of this, and this player?" Boom. That changed me again. Oh, I really like this style. It's funny that we talk about the funk thing. I spent a lot of time working on Prince, Average White Band, Confunction, Parliament, Kool and the Gang, like listening to all that stuff, and that took me another little way. And then I went so far and I was like, I'm not getting any gigs, but there's this country guitar over here that I've always liked. Oh, let me go back that way. I started learning country. 10 years in the country world. Boom, came back out of that, back to my blues and R&B roots and trying to have more jazz improvising. So it's been this zigzag with other stuff in between, understanding, you know, guitar effects type set, people that play minimally but with a lot of effects and understanding that. So it's been a 30-year journey of me doing that. So I understand what Carl is asking with my material, and I'm happy to kind of make suggestions, but I find that it's really individualistic. So I like talking to the person one-on-one, and that's what's the beauty of our site. When you're at a TrueFire or something like that, you don't have the connection with the people buying your courses as much as you'd like to, or at all, unless they contact you directly. So that's what I think was part of my dream about having this site. So hopefully that makes sense and helps, regardless of who's asking and on their path. Steve, I think we're coming.
I think Chris Delaney wants to sign us off. He's getting real excited. He's seeing the clock tick down.
Too, so
he wants to do the sign off. Jeff, you got the kazoo ready?
See, one more thing I just say, which relates to what Corey was saying and I was saying earlier, is the other thing that's happened is you go how important the fundamentals are. You know, I'm always kind of going back to the original stuff that I maybe learned years ago, but didn't play as well as I could, like, you know, minor pentatonic, major pentatonic, but playing them really well, that can be a whole world of exploration, just getting the most out of what you already know, the basics.
100%. Yeah. I've really never even worked on my triads and arpeggios as much until I started teaching more online. You know, like I was like, oh, wow, this is, because you have to mine, you have to like kind of, I call it mining, like I'm mining for gold, like of what I actually do. And I'm like, oh, I got to figure out how to actually teach this. Oh, because it's all arpeggio. And then I become a better teacher and a better player because I go back to the basics and start digging in on my own. And you bring up a good point. Like Steve and I will be like, you know, we've never made a minor pentatonic course ever. Yeah. We should, and we will. And one of the things I want to mention is now that the funk course is out, and that took a while because once you dive in, you're like, oh, there's a lot in here. And there's a lot. I could have made that course twice as long easily. But I think we want to do, you know, we're starting to bring over some of the material from TrueFire in a new presented way with the Blues Jam Companion and stuff like that. One of the things that we always wanted to do but never did at TrueFire was create solos for those rhythms as well. So if we're playing, you know, Born Under a Bad Sign or Crosscut Saw or something like that, what would be a suggested jumping off place? I think a lot of people would really get into that. So that's on the docket. A simple major and minor scale soloing course, understanding, you know, how do we use that in ways to get, because I'm the person that wants to play 5, even though there's 7 notes that we can build a scale from in a major scale. You can really get it all done in the 5 positions that you learned your pentatonics in, which is pretty cool. So I don't know if we'll do the pentatonic before the major and minor soloing, but that should keep us going through the rest of the summer and the fall for sure. I'm super excited about that because
mixing them up is really great. That sort of stuff is great.
Yeah, and that's, you know, Chris, you're on the right path because that's been the bulk of my soloing forever. You know, I mean, even the gigs I play now, like I'll play some trickier stuff, but it's very rare. Like it's 2 or 3 times a night at most. Everything else is pretty much in the box, because when I listen back on those recordings, I'm like, you lost me, Corey, because I was trying to play something tricky and it just didn't translate. And I got to be a listener too. So yeah.
Thank you.
You're the best, Chris. Thank you so much. Thanks, TM. Thanks, Pecky. Thanks, Olaf. Appreciate all the comments in the chat as well. Great hang to as well, Jim. We had a good time. All right, Steve, should we call it a day?
I think we should, and some exciting stuff for coming up this month. So we're excited to see all you guys at the next live. And like I said, if you have any thoughts, questions that come up, make sure you email us ahead of time and get working on that funk course. I mean, that's
you guys are gonna have a good
cancel
weekend.
all plans for the weekends. Tell your significant others you got plans. You got plans with Corey Congilio this weekend. So
There's gonna be a lot of this happening in your life.
Get used to it.
You know, it's gonna be fun. Doesn't matter if you're playing power chords. Same thing. It's gonna be awesome. Yeah.
So good.
A lot of stuff.
All right, guys. Well, thanks again for being a VIP, and we will chat with you soon.
Thanks, working class guitar.
All right. See you next time, everybody.